Hello, welcome to another edition of Pelham School District Today. Today we have our Director of Curriculum, Instruction and Assessment for the Pelham School District, Natasha Kolmainen, and we're going to talk a little bit about assessment. So in November, Natasha, you created a presentation for the school board on New Hampshire College and Career Ready Standards. Can you review kind of the big ideas from that?
Sure, definitely.
Bring people up to speed.
And just in case anybody's interested, that actual presentation is on our website under the academics tab on the district website. So if anybody wanted to actually listen to it and watch it, they could. But basically, the New Hampshire College and Career Ready Standards are a set of standards used statewide to build a ladder of skills and understanding that prepare students for their post-secondary experiences, whether that's high school or career. And they include standards in English language arts, specifically reading, writing, and listening and speaking, and then a whole nother set for mathematics. And then in Pelham, we're actually in our third year of implementing the New Hampshire College and Career Ready Standards.
Okay, so whether they go to college or whether they go to a career, these are supposed to prepare them to be successful.
Exactly, because we know that the job market and the college or 4-year or 2-year experience, there are some significant changes over the last 30, 40 years in terms of what students are expected to be able to do when they leave high school. So the New Hampshire College Career Ready Standards are really aimed at preparing students for those experiences.
Okay, so we have a statewide assessment. It's actually required by law that we have a statewide assessment. Can you tell us a little bit about that requirement that we have and what that is going to be looking like?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's actually born out of a federal requirement, the No Child Left Behind Act of 2001, which is actually a reiteration of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1965. It's a major federal law that is tied to funding. So we do get a significant amount of federal dollars into the state for public education. And one of the requirements of receiving those funds is that we have an annual state assessment in grades 3 through 8, and again, once in high school. And most states tend to use grade 11 as their once in high school. And that is a requirement to test annually in English language arts and mathematics. Every student in those grades. And so we in New Hampshire have in the past used an assessment called NECAP, which stands for the New England Common Assessment Program. And we did that as required in grades 3 through 8, both English language arts and mathematics, and then again in grade 11. And so we actually also have an additional state requirement to test in science in grades 4, 8, and 11. And we also call that NECAP Science. That is also a common assessment program that we created with several other New England states.
So starting this year, our annual statewide assessment is actually Smarter Balanced.
Yes.
Assessment, so it won't be NECAP. But how is this similar and how is it different from NECAP?
Well, the first is it comes with another new acronym, so we call this one SBAC. That's something that you'll hear in the news, and you'll hear educators sometimes use that, or you'll hear Smarter Balanced. But really, there are some significant differences between the two tests. One is timing. The NECAP test was given in October, and it measured the previous year's skills. This new statewide test, Smarter Balance, is given in the spring during the last 12 weeks of school, and will actually be starting at the elementary school on March 16th. The other difference, and this again is also significant, is that the NECAP was a paper and pencil test, and as a result was fairly limited in what it could do because of the way that it was delivered. This new test, Smarter Balance, is a computer test. It's adaptive. So there are actually thousands and thousands of questions in the test bank, and students sitting next to each other in a room will all get different items. It will adapt not only to make sure that students get the right types of questions so that we have a good sense of our overall program, but also it will adapt to their particular strengths and weaknesses so that if they're having an area where they're struggling, the test will adapt and give them some slightly different questions at a lower band, or if they're doing really well, it'll give them tests at a higher band so that we can get a real good sense of their profile. That's something that our previous paper and pencil test couldn't do. Everybody got pretty much one of 3 or 4 different test booklets. So there was really no adaptability to it. The other major difference is that the Smarter Balanced Assessment measures the New Hampshire College and Career Ready standards. So it's a completely different set of skills and understandings that are being assessed, whereas NECAP looked at our grade level expectations, which were basically were written in the 90s.
So the New Hampshire Career and College Ready standards are those standards we talked about at the beginning that are designed to give students the knowledge and skills so that they'll be successful after high school, whether it be in post-secondary or it be in career or whichever they're going to.
Yep. Some of the similarities, just to make sure I comment on that, is that we continue to work with a consortium to create these assessments. Large-scale assessments such as these are extremely expensive. They're very hard to develop the volume of test items that you need. So in the past, we worked with several New England states to create the NECAP. This is a significantly larger consortium. 23 states at this point, I believe, are involved or were involved in creating the Smarter Balanced Assessment. So the resources that could be pooled to create this assessment were significant. But yet it's a similarity in that we worked in common with other states to create it. Another similarity is the topics or the content covered. We're still measuring ELA and math. That is what is required by federal law. And the way that we're going to use student results, which I'm going to hopefully get a chance to talk about in a minute, is going to be very similar in how we look at the data.
So tell me a little bit about what will the students experience when they participate in Smarter Balance, because I know there's actually been some crazy stuff said out there about the experience of what will happen when the students sit down at the computer. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what is that student going to experience? Yeah,
and actually computer-based adaptive tests are not new for Pelham. Mm-hmm. We've used a test over the last several years that's referred to as NWEA. And students have taken that test in the spring for the last several years, and it is a computer adaptive test. So this isn't new for them to sit down in front of a computer and take an assessment. But basically what's going to happen is the students will go to a testing location, and each building has created different testing locations depending on the unique configurations of those buildings. But basically the students will go and they'll sit in a room, they'll sit at a computer, it'll be their computer, they won't be sharing it with anybody else. Excuse me. And over the course of several sessions, they will take both a computer adaptive test and a performance task test assessment. So there's 2 different types of tests that they're going to take. The computer adaptive test is mostly multiple choice, and then the performance task is a more kind of expanded problem, or full write is one of in ELA, or in math it's an extended problem that's going to have multiple parts. So really the idea is over several sessions they'll work through the multiple choice and the performance task in both ELA and math. They won't
ELA being
English Language Arts. Thank you. They won't be sitting at a computer for more than about an hour. We've put a lot of thought into our schedule and taken a look at the different ages that are going to be testing. And we've said, in general, at an average, about an hour we think is reasonable for students, especially at the younger ages, to sit at a computer and take a test. The older kids might be a little bit longer. The other thing that's really important is it's self-paced, essentially. So if a student needs more time to complete the assessment, they can have really as much time as they want. So, but yet we're not going to ask them to sit at a computer for 6 hours until they're done. You know, we're going to break it up into reasonable chunks. The system allows us to pause the test and have them come back at another time. So we really don't want kids to get to a point where they're fatigued or uncomfortable. We're just going to kind of break it into chunks that we feel are reasonable. So they'll take those 2 types of tests within both ELA and math. The other thing I want to make sure everybody's aware of is there's actually a New Hampshire assessment portal. It just came online probably last week, middle of the week. I think I got the email saying that it was live. And there's actually a section on that portal for students and families to go and get some information. There's manuals and flyers and a bunch of stuff you can download and read if you choose. But the really important thing is that there's actually a practice test on there. That if a family member wanted to go and see exactly what the items look like, what the content looks like, you can go online, and if you go to our district webpage, under that same academics tab where the presentation that I did in November is, there's a link to the New Hampshire Assessment Portal, and they can click on that, and then right on that very first page that it's going to take them to, there's a link for students and families, and that will take you right to a practice test if people want to actually go right online and see what it looks like. So that's a really great resource.
Great. So I'm going to talk a little bit about student privacy for a minute.
Oh,
so
good idea.
I'm going to throw that one in. Because I know some people worry about that.
Yes.
With the kneecap, our test booklets and all that kind of information, all the assessment results were attached to a number.
Correct.
They were not attached to a name. So how is Smarter Balanced similar and different in that respect with
really
student privacy?
Question. Really good question. So it has actually been a significant challenge at the state level. A few years ago, the New Hampshire legislature passed a law around student privacy that added some significant constraints to how information can be identifiable. And that particular law has made the implementation in New Hampshire more challenging than other states. And actually it has led to some delays in us getting the information from the DOE, the Department of Education, that we've been waiting for. So essentially, in New Hampshire, this time around, this is the first time we've really had to deal with this new privacy law, each student will be given a unique random identifier. And that identifier is separate from their name, separate from their SACID. That unique identifier.
And what's their SACID?
Oh, their SACID, I don't know that I know exactly what it stands for, but it's basically a number that's associated with each name, so that we can do things like separating names from student data, so that we can look at it without knowing really who the kid is. But the added law in New Hampshire really requires us to create yet another number for students, because that number, that SACID number that we use locally to separate names from data, can't actually leave the state. So there now needs to be a second number associated with each student that will go to the person, or the company, excuse me, who is handling the actual technical back end of our computer tests. So it's added a layer of complexity. It really all happens at the state level. We provide the information that we have here locally, and then they separate it, essentially.
So really what we're saying is a student's name attached to a SACID is never attached to that unique number outside of the state of New Hampshire.
Correct.
And actually, the student name attached to the SACID, attached to the results, is never shared even at the New Hampshire Department of Ed level. All they get is a compilation of Pelham School District assessment scores, and here are the students that are in grade 3.
Exactly.
I mean, here are the results from the students in grades 3, but they don't know who they are or which one matches up to which student, and they've never been able to do that with
They've never
kneecap.
been able to do that.
And so now this is a whole nother layer beyond that protects the student privacy even more.
Right, right. And it really has to do with information never leaving the state in a way that's identifiable. And it's just added a layer of complexity, but really it's, as you said, they could never match that before. So
how about, to wrap it up a little bit, great, we do this assessment, but why are we doing it? What are we going to do with the results?
What next? Exactly. So in the past, when we've used the kneecap assessment, we've been able to measure student performance from year to year, and really been able to say, okay, are students progressing the way we would hope and want them to from year to year. And we've been able to do that. We've also been able to look at our curriculum and our instruction, basically our overall educational program, and evaluate how we're doing. And having this standardized statewide test really helps us to kind of calibrate ourselves and make sure that we're moving in the right direction. The one change in this particular administration, and switching from kneecap that measured grade level expectations to Smarter Balanced that measures New Hampshire college and career ready standards, is that they're really not comparable. So this year, in terms of looking at student achievement from one year to a next, we can't compare NECAP to Smarter Balanced. So this really is a baseline year in terms of our student achievement data. And by that, I mean we're really just kind of resetting the clock for our data and saying, okay, this is where we are at this moment in time. And we will then be able to, in subsequent years, be able to track individual student growth. It's kind of like when you start a new eating program or a new healthy lifestyle, and it's that first time you get on the scale. And then you're trying to make your changes and move forward from there. So it's kind of like that. We really are setting a new baseline in terms of individual student information. However, a little bit different in terms of how we look at our educational program, because as I mentioned, we're actually in our third year of using the New Hampshire College and Career Ready standards, and this will be the first time that we have a large-scale statewide assessment that's standardized, which means we can really make some statistical do some statistical analysis and really measure how our program is doing. So we're really excited about that because we haven't had an assessment that's aligned to what we're doing here in Pelham. This will be the first time that we have that. So to further my analogy, it's almost like we've been on this new healthy lifestyle for 3 years, and now we finally get to step back on the scale and see if it's working. So that, in terms of that, that's really exciting because we've made some really significant changes, and our teachers are working extremely hard to meet these new rigorous expectations and prepare our students for what they need to know and be able to do beyond high school. And we've created local assessments to measure how we're doing, but this will be an opportunity for us to kind of calibrate those local assessments and really be able to say, hey, yeah, we're on the right track in this area and this area and this area. And oh, you know what, over here, this isn't really what we had hoped for. So let's sit down and talk about what do we need to change, just as an example, maybe in our writing of argument or opinion pieces. You know, what do the results show us about how our educational program is preparing students for that type of writing? And then we can use that information to sit down together with teachers and make some changes and get those in place for the next school year. Our teachers get together in the summer. We do a lot of curriculum work. We work on our units. We work on our assessments. We work on our pacing. We have dozens of teachers who come together over the summer and do that kind of work. So this information is so much better timed than what we used to get, because we used to get our results in January, and they were so old by the time we got them, because it was January that we got the results about what we did last year. So we really couldn't act on it. Whereas this time around, we're going to get our results. What they're telling us is late June that we'll actually have our results, and we'll be able to do something with those results over the summer that's going to positively impact students when they come back in September.
Great.
So that's really exciting.
So I'm a parent out there, and my child's in 3rd or 4th grade. They're probably going to test when?
So they're going to start, it goes by grade, essentially. So the elementary school will start on March 16th, or maybe the 17th. I think they don't test actually on Monday, but I could be wrong about that. I'll have to double check. But essentially March 16th is when the window opens where we can start testing. And then it kind of goes up by grade level. So as we work our way from March 16th to the end of the year, we're really kind of working our way from the elementary school to the middle school to the high school.
So really we're saying March is the elementary school,
Yep.
about April is the middle school, and May,
Right.
around May is the high school.
Right. And the high school has done a really nice job kind of thinking about their schedule, being thoughtful about all of the other assessments that students at the high school need to take. We have a lot of students participating in AP, Advanced Placement courses. Those exams are in early May. We want to make sure that the students have the time to devote to those exams because they've put a whole year's worth of work into preparing for them. And so they've really kind of scheduled the assessments that they need to do. They also have to do the science NECAP. And so they've been really thoughtful about making sure that those different assessments are happening in such a way that students can meet the different expectations and not be sitting in front of an assessment for an entire week.
Great. Well, thank you for coming and sharing with us
I'm glad
about
to have had the opportunity.
the new changes to our assessment programs as far as statewide assessment. And thank you for joining us for another edition of Pelham School District Today.